The wind over Iron Ridge didn't whisper, it screamed. In the year 1042, the Frostclaw pack lived by one law: strength is the only currency. Alpha King Bane Sterling stood at the edge of the ritual pit, his massive frame wrapped in wolf pelts that had belonged to his father and his father's father before him. His face was all sharp angles and old scars, a man built from violence and winter. His silver-streaked hair whipped around his jaw as he stared down at the shallow grave his warriors had just finished digging. Inside that grave, a tiny white pup trembled. "The goddess demands a culling," Bane's voice cut through the howling wind like a blade through flesh. His words were cold, practiced. A pack is only as fast as its slowest member. To let weakness live is to invite the great hunger. The elders stood in a half circle behind him, their faces carved from stone. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their silence was approval. The pup's name was Feneris, though the pack had already renamed him. They called him the Void. He had been born with eyes clouded white as snow, blind, useless. Clara Montgomery stood at the back of the crowd, her fingers clutching the edge of her thin wool shawl so tightly her knuckles had gone bone white. She was an Omega, the lowest rank in the Frostclaw hierarchy. Her job was to mend torn leather, scrub blood from the warrior's boots, and stay invisible. For 3 weeks, she had hidden Feneris in the back of the stables. She had shared her own rations, salted meat no bigger than her thumb, watered wine that tasted like rust. She had watched him grow stronger, sharper, despite his blindness. Now she watched the first shovel of frozen dirt hit his white fur. Feneris didn't whine. He only tilted his head, his sightless eyes searching for the one scent that had meant warmth, safety. He smelled Clara. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. The crowd parted like a wound opening. "Please," her voice cracked. "He is just a child. Let me take him to the lowlands. He will never return. I swear it on my bloodline." Bane turned, slowly. His eyes, pale gold and merciless, locked onto hers. "An Omega speaks?" His tone was almost amused, almost. "Go back to the hearth, Clara. If you crave a pup so badly, find a mate who isn't a coward." He gestured to the pit. "This one belongs to the earth now." The warriors laughed, low, guttural. Clara's throat burned, but she didn't move. Bane's expression hardened. "Bury it." By nightfall, the pit was filled. A heavy stone, carved with the pack's ancient crest, was placed on top of the mound. The elders said it was to keep scavengers away. Clara knew better. It was to make sure nothing crawled back out. In medieval werewolf cultures, pack structures were brutal and unforgiving. The culling wasn't just cruelty, it was survival strategy. Packs believed that keeping weak members alive would slow them during hunts, making the entire group vulnerable to starvation or rival attacks. The Omega rank, historically, was reserved for those who couldn't fight: healers, caregivers, the elderly. They were essential, but expendable. This hierarchy mirrors real wolf-pack dynamics, where the Omega wolf often eats last and bears the brunt of pack aggression, yet plays a critical role in reducing internal conflict and caring for young. Here's a question for you. If you were Clara, would you have spoken up, even knowing it could cost you everything, or would you have stayed silent to survive? Drop a comment. I want to know if you're a digger or a survivor, because what happens next will test both. And if you believe that strength isn't just muscle, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is defy the crowd, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button. Join the pack that digs deeper. Let's continue. The pack didn't just watch Clara step forward. They stopped breathing. An Omega challenging an Alpha wasn't just rare, it was suicidal. "Please," Clara said again, her voice steadier now despite the trembling in her legs. "He hasn't been given a chance. Let me prove he can survive outside the ridge. I'll take full responsibility." Bane's jaw tightened. He descended from the raised stone platform where the elders stood, his boots crunching against the frozen ground. Each step was deliberate, measured. When he stopped in front of Clara, he was close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark beard, the thin scar cutting across his left eyebrow. "You want to take responsibility?" Bane's voice was quiet, dangerous. "You who can't even carry a full water pail without stopping to rest? You who flinches when the warriors raise their voices?" He leaned down, his breath visible in the cold air. "What makes you think you could keep anything alive?" Clara's face flushed, but she held his gaze. "Because I already have, for 3 weeks." The crowd murmured, shocked, angry. Bane's eyes narrowed. "You stole pack resources to feed a creature we had already condemned? I shared my own rations. I took nothing that wasn't mine. Your rations are the pack's mercy." Bane straightened, addressing the crowd now. "This is what happens when we tolerate weakness. It breeds delusion. She believes her feelings matter more than our survival." The warriors laughed, harsh, cutting. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Garrick, spat into the dirt near Clara's feet. "The Omega thinks she's a mother now. Should we give her a nursery next? Maybe a rocking chair?" More laughter. Clara's hands curled into fists, but she said nothing. Bane turned back to the pit. "Lower him." 2 warriors stepped forward, lifting the woven basket that held Feneris. The pup's white fur was stark against the dark wicker. His blind eyes were open, unseeing, but his small nose twitched as he searched for Clara's scent. Clara lunged forward. "Wait!" A heavy hand clamped onto her shoulder. Garrick. "You've said enough, Omega." She struggled, but his grip was iron. She watched, helpless, as the basket was lowered into the shallow grave. Feneris made no sound. He simply curled tighter, his tiny body disappearing below the rim of the earth. "First shovel," Bane commanded. An elder stepped forward, lifting a blade of frozen dirt. It hit Fenris's fur with a dull, muffled sound. Clara's knees buckled. Garrick held her upright, forcing her to watch. Second shovel. Another load of dirt. Then another. The white fur vanished beneath brown earth and gray stone. By the time the pit was filled, Clara had stopped struggling. Her eyes were dry, empty. The warriors rolled the heavy ceiling stone into place, a slab of granite carved with the pack's crest, a wolf's head surrounded by thorns. It fit perfectly over the grave, as if it had been made for this exact purpose. Because it had. This wasn't the first culling. It wouldn't be the last. Bane wiped his hands on his cloak and turned toward the great hall. The feast begins in 1 hour. Everyone attends. The crowd dispersed, their voices rising in anticipation of roasted meat and warm ale. Clara stood alone by the sealed grave, Garrick's hand still on her shoulder. "You should have kept your mouth shut." Then he released her and walked away. The wind howled. The stone didn't move. Clara stayed until the snow began to fall, covering the grave with white, erasing it, as if Feneris had never existed at all. The great hall blazed with firelight and laughter. Inside, the pack tore into roasted venison and honeyed bread, celebrating their purity. The ale flowed, the warriors boasted, the elders nodded with satisfaction. Clara wasn't inside. She stood in the courtyard, staring at the sealed grave. Snow fell steadily now, thick flakes that clung to her hair and shoulders. Her thin wool shawl was already soaked through. She should have been freezing. She felt nothing. The stone was too heavy to move. She knew that. 3 men had rolled it into place, but she dropped to her knees anyway, her hands pressing against the cold granite. She pushed. Her muscles screamed. The stone didn't budge. She needed a lever, tools, help. She had none of those things, so she moved to the edge of the stone and began to dig. The earth was frozen solid, harder than the stone itself. Her nails scraped uselessly against the surface. She looked around, desperate, and spotted a jagged piece of slate near the old well. She grabbed it and returned to the grave. The slate bit into her palm as she drove it into the ground. Again. Again. Each strike sent shocks of pain up her arms, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. I promised you the sun, she thought, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I promised. The snow fell harder. The wind howled. From inside the great hall came a roar of laughter. Someone had told a joke. The pack was warm, fed, safe. Clara's hands were bleeding. She didn't care. Hours passed. Her fingers had gone numb, then started burning, then went numb again. The slate cracked in half. She used the sharper piece. Her knuckles were torn open, the blood freezing as soon as it hit the air. She could barely feel her hands anymore, but she kept digging, pulling away frozen chunks of earth grain by grain. The stone still loomed above her, immovable, but around its edges she was making progress, slowly, painfully, just a little more. Her vision blurred. From cold or tears or exhaustion, she didn't know. Her body was shaking so violently she could barely hold the slate. But every time she thought about stopping, she saw Fenris's face, those clouded white eyes, the way he had tilted his head toward her voice. He trusted you. She dug deeper. Finally, her hand broke through. She felt empty space beneath the frozen crust. Her heart lurched. She dropped the slate and used her bare hands, tearing at the dirt, widening the gap. Soil packed beneath her fingernails. Her fingers were raw, the skin peeled back in places, but she didn't stop. She reached into the darkness. Her hand touched something soft, warm. She pulled. Fenris came free slowly, his small body limp and covered in dirt. Clara dragged him out and held him against her chest. He wasn't moving. His white fur was brown with earth. His tiny mouth hung open. "No," Clara whispered. "No, no, no." She pressed her ear to his chest. Nothing. She turned him over, brushing the dirt from his nose and mouth. Then she did the only thing she could think of. She pressed her mouth to his small snout and breathed. Once, twice. Nothing. "Please," she begged. "Please." She breathed again. Fenris's body twitched. A tiny wet cough. His lungs expanded. His legs kicked weakly. His sightless eyes opened, and his nose twitched, searching for her scent. Clara sobbed, a single broken sound. She pulled him close, wrapping him in her soaked shawl. He was alive, barely, but alive. Then reality crashed down. Bane's law was absolute, a life for a life. If the Alpha discovered the grave empty, he would hunt them both, and he would kill them, slowly, publicly. She looked at the open pit, at the heavy stone she couldn't move back into place even if she wanted to. She needed a body. Her mind raced. She couldn't kill, wouldn't. But Bane didn't need a body. He needed evidence, proof that something was buried and stayed buried. She thought of the fox. 2 days ago, she'd found it in a trapper's snare near the eastern woods, already dead, frozen stiff. She'd left it there, thinking it would make a meal for scavengers. She ran. The fox was still there, its rust-colored fur crusted with ice. She carried it back to the grave, her arms aching. Then she took off her heavy winter cloak, the one marked with the Montgomery family crest, the only thing of value she owned, and wrapped the fox inside it. She buried the bundle deep, filling the pit as best she could. The earth was loose now, easier to move. She piled it high, packing it down with her torn hands. Then, with the last of her strength, she rolled smaller stones around the edges to make it look undisturbed. It wasn't perfect, but in the dark, in the snow, it would hold. She hoped. Fenris whimpered softly against her chest. Clara looked toward the fortress, toward the whining caves, the only place no one would follow. "Come on," she whispered. "We're not done yet." The winding caves earned their name honestly. The wind that blew through the narrow tunnels beneath the Iron Ridge fortress made a sound like a dying wolf, high, mournful, endless. The warriors said the caves were haunted by the spirits of those who had died in shame. The elders claimed the goddess herself wept there for the weakness of mortals. No one entered the winding caves, which made them perfect. Clara had discovered the entrance by accident years ago while hauling water from the underground spring. A crack in the stone wall, barely wide enough for a child. She'd squeezed through once out of curiosity and found a network of dry, twisting tunnels that stretched deep into the mountain. Now she carried Feneris through that same crack, her body scraping against the rough stone. The pup was silent, pressed against her chest. She could feel his heartbeat, fast, fragile, but steady. Inside, the caves opened up. The ceiling rose high enough that she could stand, and the wind song echoed off the walls in layered, ghostly harmonies. But deeper in, past the first bend, the sound softened. There was a small chamber there, no bigger than a horse stall, where the stone was smooth and the air was still. Clara had prepared this place weeks ago, back when she'd first realized Feneris might not survive the culling. She'd brought dry moss from the stables, stolen scraps of wool, a cracked clay bowl for water. It wasn't much, but it was hidden. She laid Feneris down in the nest of moss. He curled into himself immediately, shivering. His white fur was still damp with dirt and melted snow. Clara used the edge of her dress to wipe him clean as best she could, working carefully around his small legs and clouded eyes. "You're safe now," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I promise, you're safe." Fenris's nose twitched toward her voice. His tiny mouth opened, and a soft whine escaped. Not pain, but need. He was hungry. Clara reached into the inner pocket of her dress. She'd hidden a piece of salted pork there 3 days ago, saving it for this exact moment. It was small, hard, but it was food. She tore off a tiny piece and held it to Fenris's mouth. He ate slowly, his teeth barely strong enough to break the meat, but he ate, and when he was finished, he nuzzled against her hand, blind, trusting, alive. Clara sat back against the cave wall, her entire body trembling. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Her hands throbbed, her lungs burned. She was cold in a way that went deeper than skin. But Feneris was breathing. She pulled him into her lap, wrapping what was left of her shawl around them both. "I don't know how long we can do this," she admitted quietly. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Feneris made a soft sound, not quite a bark, not quite a whimper. He pressed his head against her chest, right over her heart, and Clara realized something. She wasn't strong, not by the pack's standards. She couldn't fight, she couldn't hunt, she couldn't even move the stone that had sealed his grave. But she had torn through frozen earth with her bare hands. She had breathed life back into lungs that had stopped. She had defied the Alpha, the Elders, the entire pack. Not because she was strong, because he was worth saving. "I choose you," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind song. "I don't care what they say. I don't care what it costs. I choose you." Fenris's tail gave a single, weak thump against her leg. For the first time since the culling, Clara felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Winter deepened its grip on Iron Ridge. A month passed, then another. To the pack, Clara Montgomery seemed to be fading like morning mist. Her cheeks hollowed, the bones of her wrists became sharp enough to cut. Her dress, already worn thin, began to hang on her frame like a burial shroud. The other Omegas noticed first. "You're wasting away," said Marin, the elderly woman who oversaw the kitchens. She ladled a thin broth into Clara's wooden bowl, the nightly ration. A single crust of dark bread sat beside it. "Are you ill?" "No," Clara said quietly. "Just tired." "Then eat more." "I am eating. The lie tasted like ash. Every night, Clara received her bowl of broth and her portion of bread, and every night she tucked that bread into the inner pocket of her dress. She drank only enough to keep herself upright, 3, maybe 4 swallows, then poured the rest into a clay jar she'd hidden beneath her cot. When the fortress slept, she carried the jar and the bread to the whining caves. Feneris was growing. Despite his blindness, maybe because of it, the pup was becoming something remarkable. His white fur had thickened into a dense coat that caught the dim light like snow under moonlight. His legs, once wobbly and weak, now carried him through the tunnels with surprising confidence. He moved like he could see. Clara watched him navigate the dark caves, his head tilting at slight angles as he listened to the echo of his own footsteps. He never stumbled, never ran into walls. He learned to map the world through sound and scent, building a picture in his mind more detailed than sight could ever provide. "You're not blind," Clara whispered one night, watching him leap from one smooth stone to another with perfect precision. "You just see differently." Fenris turned toward her voice, his clouded eyes bright in the darkness. His tail wagged once. Clara smiled. It felt strange on her face. She couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled. Then her stomach cramped. Hard. She doubled over, pressing her hand to her abdomen. The hunger had become a living thing inside her, a beast with claws that raked at her insides. She'd felt it for weeks now, but lately it had grown teeth. Fenris padded over to her, concerned. He nuzzled her hand. "I'm fine," Clara lied, straightening slowly. She unwrapped the bread from her pocket and broke it into pieces. "Eat." He hesitated. His nose twitched, scenting her. He could smell the hunger on her, Clara realized, the weakness. "Eat," she repeated, more firmly. He did, slowly, as if he understood what it cost her. When he finished, Clara poured the last of the broth into his bowl. He lapped it up eagerly, his pink tongue flashing. When the bowl was empty, he looked up at her, tilting his head. "Why aren't you eating?" "Because you need it more than I do," Clara whispered. That night, as she climbed back through the crack in the cave wall, her hands shook badly. She could barely grip the stone. Her vision swam. Twice, she had to stop and press her forehead against the cold rock, willing herself not to pass out. When she finally stumbled back to the Omega quarters, Merrin was waiting. The old woman took one look at Clara and cursed. "You're killing yourself." "I'm fine. You're a liar." Merrin grabbed Clara's wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She pushed up the sleeve of Clara's dress, revealing an arm so thin the bones stood out like tree branches in winter. "What are you doing, child?" Clara pulled her arm back. "Surviving. By starving? By choosing." Clara met the old woman's eyes. "We all make choices, Merrin. This is mine." Merrin stared at her for a long moment. Then she sighed and reached into her apron. She pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth, a heel of bread, a piece of dried fish. "I don't want your pity," Clara said. "It's not pity." Merrin pressed the bundle into Clara's hands. "It's respect. I don't know what you're protecting, girl, but whatever it is, it must be worth dying for." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to tell Merrin about Fenris, about the caves, about the choice she'd made, but words felt too heavy. "Thank you," she whispered instead. Merrin nodded once, then shuffled back to her cot. Clara didn't eat the food. She saved it for Fenris. By the 3rd month, Clara could barely stand for more than a few minutes without her legs trembling. Her hair had lost its luster, hanging limp and dull around her face. Dark circles carved shadows beneath her eyes. But Fenris was thriving. He'd grown to nearly twice his original size. His hearing had become so acute he could detect a mouse's heartbeat 3 levels above the caves. His sense of smell could identify every herb in the mountain, every warrior in the fortress, every shift in the weather before the storms hit. One night, as Clara sat against the cave wall, too weak to stand, Fenris brought her something. A rabbit, freshly killed.
He'd hunted it himself in the tunnels, tracking it by sound alone. He dropped it at her feet and sat back, watching her with those clouded white eyes. Your turn to eat. Clara stared at the rabbit, at the pup who'd caught it, at the role reversal happening before her eyes. She'd saved him, fed him, kept him alive. Now he was trying to do the same for her. Her hands shook as she reached for the rabbit. She hadn't eaten real meat in months. Her body screamed for it. But even as she held it, even as her mouth watered, she hesitated. "We'll share it," she said finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Equal portions." Fenris's tail thumped against the stone floor. That night, for the first time in 3 months, Clara ate until her stomach stopped hurting. It wasn't enough to heal her, not yet, but it was enough to keep her breathing, and for now, that was all that mattered.
It happened on a morning when the snow fell soft and silent. Clara was crossing the courtyard, carrying an armful of firewood for the kitchens. The load was too heavy. She knew that before she lifted it, but she'd convinced herself she could manage. She made it halfway across the frozen stones before her legs gave out. The world tilted, the firewood scattered. Clara hit the ground hard, her shoulder striking the ice-slicked stone. She tried to push herself up, but her arms were trembling too violently. Black spots danced across her vision. "Montgomery!" Heavy footsteps. Then hands, large, rough, gripping her shoulders and lifting her upright. Bane Sterling stared down at her, his gold eyes narrowed. He'd been crossing to the armory. Now he held her at arm's length, studying her like she was a puzzle with missing pieces. "When did you last eat?" His voice was low, dangerous. "This morning," Clara lied. "Liar." Bane's grip tightened. Not painful, but firm. "You're skin and bone. I can feel every rib." Clara tried to pull away. "I'm fine." "You're dying." There was something in his voice Clara had never heard before. Not quite concern, but close. "The winter is hitting you hard, Montgomery. I cannot have my best healer wasting away. The pack needs you." Clara almost laughed. She wasn't a healer. She was an Omega who sometimes bandaged cuts and brewed fever tea. But she understood what Bane was really saying. "You're useful. Don't break." "I've been fasting," Clara said. "For the goddess." Bane's eyes narrowed further. "Fasting? For clarity." Clarity. He repeated the word like it tasted wrong. His head tilted slightly, and Clara's heart stopped. He was scenting her. Werewolves had senses far beyond human. Bane could smell fear, lies, sickness. Right now, he was trying to identify what was wrong with Clara, why her body was failing while her heartbeat remained steady and determined. His nostrils flared. His entire body went rigid. "What is that?" Bane's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "What?" Clara's pulse hammered. "That scent." Bane leaned closer, his nose nearly touching her collar. "It's wrong. Old, but not old. Familiar, but—" He stopped. His face went pale. "Impossible." Clara felt ice flood her veins. He smelled Feneris. The pup's scent clung to her clothes, her hair, her skin. She'd been so careful to wash in the underground springs, to scrub away evidence, but scent was stubborn. It lingered in the fibers of fabric, in the oils of skin, and Bane Sterling could smell death, or the refusal of it. Bane said suddenly, releasing her. His voice was cold again, controlled, but his eyes were wild, calculating. "You're dismissed," he said. "Go to your quarters. Eat. That's an order." Clara didn't argue. She turned and walked away as quickly as her shaking legs could carry her. She could feel his gaze burning into her back. She didn't go to her quarters. She went to the whining caves. Fenris was waiting for her in the main chamber, his white fur glowing faintly in the dim light filtering through the cracks. He sensed her panic immediately. His ears flattened, his body tensed. "He knows," Clara whispered, sinking to her knees. "He doesn't understand it yet, but he knows something is wrong." Fenris moved to her side, pressing his warm body against her legs.
Clara wrapped her arms around Fenris, burying her face in his fur. "I don't know what to do. If he finds you—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Outside the caves, snow began to fall harder. The wind picked up, turning the gentle flakes into a cutting storm. The whining began, that high, mournful sound that made grown warriors cross themselves and hurry past. Clara held Fenris tighter, and in the fortress above, Bane Sterling stood at the entrance to the Omega quarters, his eyes fixed on the empty cot where Clara should have been. He turned and walked towards the old well, towards the crack in the stone wall that most people never noticed, towards the whining caves.
Clara heard him coming. The footsteps were too heavy to be anyone else, deliberate, unhurried, the sound of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. Fenris heard him too. The pup's head snapped toward the entrance tunnel, his lips pulling back to reveal small, sharp teeth. A low growl rumbled in his chest, deeper than any sound that should come from something so young. "Stay behind me," Clara whispered, positioning herself between Fenris and the narrow passage. Bane appeared moments later. He had to crouch to fit through the tunnel, his broad shoulders scraping stone. When he straightened in the main chamber, he seemed to fill the entire space, a mountain of muscle and authority. His eyes swept the cave, taking in the nest of moss, the clay water bowl, the remnants of Clara's sacrifices. Then his gaze landed on Fenris. The Alpha went very, very still. "You dug him out," Bane said. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "You actually dug him out." Clara lifted her chin. "Yes, I watched them bury him. I sealed the stone myself. I know. 3 grown men couldn't move that stone. How did you—" Bane stopped, looking at Clara's hands. Even in the dim light, he could see the scars, white lines crisscrossing her palms and fingers, the permanent marks of torn flesh and healed-over wounds. "You didn't move it. You went around it." "I went through it," Clara corrected, "through the earth." Bane's jaw worked silently. He looked back at Fenris, who hadn't moved. The pup stood rigid, his clouded eyes fixed on the Alpha despite being unable to see him. But Fenris didn't need sight. He could hear Bane's heartbeat, smell his intention, feel the weight of his presence. "He should be dead," Bane said. "He isn't. The law demands—" "The law is wrong," Clara interrupted. Her voice didn't shake. "Your law says strength is the only currency, but I am the weakest member of this pack, and I kept him alive when your strongest warriors would have let him rot. So tell me, Alpha, what does that make your law worth?" Bane's eyes flashed gold. Dangerous. He stepped forward. Fenris moved. The pup didn't attack. He didn't need to. He simply opened his mouth and howled. The sound was impossible. It wasn't the high yip of a pup or the broken keen of a dying animal. It was a resonance, low and ancient and powerful, that shook the cave walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. The water in the clay bowl rippled. Clara felt it in her chest, her bones, her teeth. Bane stumbled backward, his hands flying to his ears. The howl lasted only seconds, but when it faded, the silence that followed was absolute. Bane lowered his hands slowly. He was staring at Fenris like he'd never seen him before. "That sound. That's not. That can't be. What? What is it?" Bane didn't answer. He crossed the chamber in 2 strides and dropped to one knee in front of Fenris. The pup growled again, but Bane ignored it. He reached out, carefully, respectfully, and turned Fenris slightly, examining his chest. Clara saw it at the same moment Bane did. There, on Fenris's white fur, partially hidden beneath the thick coat, was a mark, a birthmark, dark against pale, shaped like a broken crown with 3 points reaching upward. Bane's face went completely white. The crest of the blind seer, the mark of the first king. "What are you talking about?" Clara demanded. Bane sat back on his heels, his expression stunned. "There's a prophecy, an old one, older than the Frostclaw pack, older than the ridge itself.
He gestured to the mark on Fenris's chest. It says that when the packs have grown too violent, too consumed by strength, the goddess will send a king to restore balance, a king born without sight, because he won't need eyes to see the truth. Clara felt her heartbeat quicken. You're saying Fenris is the prophesied heir? Bane's voice was hollow. The seer king, the one meant to lead us out of darkness. He looked up at Clara, and for the first time since she'd known him, the Alpha looked afraid. I tried to kill the future of our people. You didn't know, Clara said quietly. I should have. Bane stood abruptly, pacing the small chamber. The elders knew. They had to have known. That's why they insisted on the culling. They weren't protecting the pack. They were protecting their power. A seer king would end the reign of the warriors, would shift authority to wisdom instead of strength. Clara moved to Fenris, placing a protective hand on his head. What happens now? Bane turned to face her. His expression was complex: shame, anger, calculation, and something that might have been respect. Now, he said slowly, we have a problem. If I present Fenris as the seer king, the elders will demand proof of lineage. They'll question why I tried to kill him. They'll depose me for attempting to murder the prophesied heir. He met Clara's eyes. To save my throne, I'd need to hide the truth. And if you hide it, he'll never fulfill his destiny. The pack will continue as it always has, strong, brutal, and dying from the inside. Clara held Bane's gaze. You have a choice to make, Alpha, the same choice I made 3 months ago. Your power, you looked down at Fenris, or his life. Bane was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he knelt again, not in front of Clara, in front of Fenris. I am the Alpha of the Frostclaw pack, and I am the smallest soul in this cave.
Bane moved them that same night. The tower room was in the oldest part of the fortress, accessible only by a narrow spiral staircase that wound through the stone like a serpent. The door was thick oak, reinforced with iron bands. When Bane closed it behind them, Clara heard the unmistakable sound of a lock turning. For your protection, Bane said, his back still to them. The room was surprisingly comfortable. A real bed with furs, a fireplace already burning, a table with bread, cheese, dried meat, and ale. More food than Clara had seen in months. Fenris growled low in his throat. Bane turned slowly. I'm not your enemy, pup. Then why lock the door? Clara asked. Because if the elders discover what I know, what you know, they'll kill all 3 of us. Bane moved to the window, looking out over the snow-covered courtyard below. I need time to think, to plan. Clara didn't move toward the food, though her stomach cramped at the sight of it. Plan what? How to present Fenris without destroying myself in the process. There it was, the truth beneath the protection. You're not trying to save him, Clara said quietly. You're trying to save yourself. Bane's shoulders tensed. I'm trying to save us all. If I go to the pack now and say, I tried to kill the seer king, they'll tear me apart. The elders will use it as proof that I'm unfit to lead. They'll install someone they can control, probably my brother Thorne, and Feneris will disappear quietly into another grave. He turned to face her. Is that what you want? I want you to do what's right. Right? Bane laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. There is no right here, Montgomery. There's only survival. Mine, yours, his. He gestured to Fenris. I can protect you both, but only if I maintain my authority. That means time, strategy. That means lies, Clara corrected. Yes, Bane didn't flinch from the word. Lies that keep you alive. He left then, locking the door behind him. Clara stared at the wood for a long moment before turning to Fenris. The pup was already at the table, sniffing the food. He looked back at her, questioning. Go ahead, Clara said softly. Eat. But as Fenris tore into the meat, Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. They'd escaped one prison only to enter another. Over the following weeks, Bane visited daily. He always brought food, more than Clara and Fenris could possibly eat.
He always asked how they were. He always checked the window locks, the door, the fireplace. He never looked Clara in the eye. She understood why. Every time he saw her, he was reminded of his choice. Not the choice to protect them, the choice to protect himself through them. "When?" Clara asked one evening as Bane prepared to leave. "When what? When will you tell the pack?" Bane's jaw tightened. "When it's safe." Safe for who? He didn't answer. He just locked the door. Clara watched Feneris grow stronger in captivity. The pup was nearly full-grown now, his white coat thick and lustrous, his movements graceful despite the confined space. But she also saw the way he paced the room, the way his ears swiveled to every sound beyond the door. He wasn't meant to be caged. Neither was she. One night, Clara woke to find Feneris sitting at the window, his clouded eyes fixed on something she couldn't see. When she joined him, she understood. Below, in the courtyard, torches blazed. Warriors were gathering. Something was happening, and Bane hadn't come to warn them.
The door burst open just before dawn. Not Bane, Thorne Sterling, Bane's younger brother, a man with the same silver-streaked hair but cruel, hungry eyes. Behind him, a dozen warriors with drawn swords. Clara scrambled to her feet, positioning herself in front of Feneris. "What is this?" "Rescue," Thorne said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "My brother has been keeping secrets. The pack deserves to know what he's hiding in his tower." "Bane ordered us here," Clara said, "for our protection." "Protection," Thorne laughed. "Is that what he called it?" He stepped into the room, his warriors fanning out behind him. "Bane has been holding you prisoner, Montgomery, you and the creature he tried to murder months ago, the creature that should have stayed buried." Clara's blood ran cold. "How do you know about—" "I know everything." Thorne's eyes glittered. "I know she dug through frozen earth to save a blind pup. I know she's been starving herself to feed it. I know that pup has a mark on its chest, a mark that certain people would find very interesting." Feneris growled, his body coiled tight. "Easy, beast," Thorne said. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to liberate you, to show the pack what Bane has been hiding, to prove he's unfit to lead." Clara's mind raced. This wasn't rescue. This was a coup. "Where is Bane?" she demanded. "Detained," Thorne smiled. "The elders are questioning him as we speak. By morning, I'll be alpha." "And then what? You'll present Feneris as the seer king?" "Oh no." Thorne's smile widened. "I'll present him as proof of Bane's treachery, evidence that my brother defied pack law, wasted resources on a useless animal, and imprisoned an Omega to hide his crime. The pack will demand Bane's execution." He tilted his head. "And once Bane is dead, I'll finish what he started. I'll put that pup back in the ground where it belongs." Clara's hands curled into fists. "You'll have to go through me." "I was hoping you'd say that." Thorne nodded to his warriors. Two of them moved forward, reaching for Clara. Feneris exploded into motion. The pup, no, the wolf, launched himself at the nearest warrior, his teeth finding the man's sword arm. The warrior screamed, dropping his weapon. Feneris released him and spun, placing himself between Clara and Thorne. The other warriors drew back, wary. Thorne's expression darkened. "Kill them both." The warriors advanced. Then the room went cold. Not physically, something deeper, a presence that pressed against every soul in the chamber like an invisible hand. Feneris stood perfectly still, his blinded eyes fixed on nothing and everything. When he opened his mouth, a single word echoed through the minds of everyone present. "Stop." It wasn't a sound, it was a command that bypassed ears and struck directly into consciousness. Clara felt it, the warriors felt it, Thorne felt it. Everyone froze. No one moved, no one could move. Then Feneris turned his blind gaze toward the shadows near the fireplace, a space where nothing should have been. "Come out," the voice commanded.
The shadows moved. A figure emerged, robed, hooded, one of the pack elders. Clara's breath caught. Elder Matthias? The old man's face was pale, his hands trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You, Thorne snarled. What are you doing here? He was waiting, Clara realized, her voice hollow, hiding, ready to kill whoever survived this fight. Matthias's silence was confirmation. Feneris took a step forward. The temperature dropped further. Tell them, the voice demanded. Tell them what you did. The seer king, Matthias whispered, his voice breaking. The prophecy. We knew. The elders. We've always known. Every generation we watch for the mark, and every generation we make sure the marked ones don't survive. His eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but we had no choice. The old ways are all we have. Without them, what are we? You're cowards, Clara said. You've been killing prophets to keep your seats at the high table. The warriors stared at Matthias in horror. Even Thorne looked shaken. How many? One warrior asked. How many pups have you buried? 7, Matthias whispered. Over 300 years. 7 marked children. The arena erupted. Warriors shouted. Thorne backed away from Matthias as if the elder carried plague. And Feneris, the 8th marked child, the one who survived, sat down calmly and waited for the truth to burn through the pack like wildfire.
By the time Bane reached the tower, half the pack had already gathered. The Alpha King looked haggard. His hands were bound. The elders had detained him, just as Thorne said. But when the warriors saw Matthias's confession, saw the seer king sitting calm and terrible in the firelight, they released Bane and dragged the elder before him instead. Bane stared at Matthias, at Thorne, at the warriors who'd been ready to execute him hours ago. Then he looked at Clara. She stood beside Feneris, her hand resting on the wolf's white fur. She was thin, scarred, exhausted. She should have looked weak. She looked like a force of nature. I need to tell you all something, Bane said, his voice carrying through the tower room and down the spiral stairs where more pack members crowded to listen. I gave an order 3 months ago to bury a blind pup alive. I sealed the grave myself. I celebrated while the earth swallowed an innocent life. The crowd murmured. This woman, Bane gestured to Clara, defied me. She dug through frozen ground with her bare hands. She breathed life back into dead lungs. She starved herself so this pup could eat. She bled so he could stay warm. His voice cracked. She did what I, the Alpha, was too blind to do. She saw what I could not. He turned to Feneris, and slowly, with the entire pack watching, Bane Sterling removed his crown. It was a simple circlet of iron, forged by the first Alpha of the Frostclaw pack centuries ago. Heavy, ancient, absolute. Bane placed it on the floor between himself and the white wolf. I am not fit to lead, Bane said. I listened to fear instead of wisdom. I valued strength over mercy. I almost destroyed the future of our people because I was too proud to question the old ways. Feneris stood. He padded forward slowly, his paws silent on the stone. When he reached Bane, he didn't take the crown. Instead, he placed one paw on Bane's chest. And then, impossibly, Feneris spoke. Not telepathically this time, out loud, in a voice that was young and old at once, layered with something beyond mortal understanding. You are not unfit, Feneris said. You are learning. That is all any king can do. The crowd gasped. But the law you followed, that law is poison. Strength without sacrifice is tyranny. Power without compassion is violence. From this day forward, the Frostclaw pack lives by a new rule. He lifted his clouded eyes to the assembled warriors, elders, omegas. Sacrifice is strength. Protection is power, and the smallest among you has as much worth as the greatest. He turned to Clara.
This woman saved me when she had nothing, fed me when she was starving, protected me when the entire world wanted me dead. She is not an Omega." His voice rang like a bell. "She is the guardian of the Ridge, the first and highest advisor to the Seer King. Her word carries my authority." Clara's eyes widened. "Fenris, You dug me out of the darkness," Fenris said softly. "Let me lift you into the light." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. She'd been invisible for so long, a shadow, a tool. Now she was seen. Bane stood slowly. He picked up the crown, but instead of placing it on his own head or Fenris's, he held it out to Clara. "I'm not worthy to crown a king, but you are." Clara took the crown with shaking hands. It was heavier than she expected, cold. She placed it gently on Fenris's white head. The crown settled as if it had been made for him. The Seer King had returned. The pack knelt. Even Thorne, even the remaining elders, not out of fear, but out of something deeper, recognition that the old ways had failed and something new was being born. Fenris addressed them all. "The pit where I was buried will remain open, not as a grave, but as a reminder. We will plant flowers there every spring, and we will remember that no matter how deep you bury the truth, love has the strength to dig it out." Years later, the story was carved into the stone above that pit. The eyes see the world as it is. The heart sees the world as it could be. Never mistake silence for weakness, for the earth always gives back what was stolen in the dark. Clara Montgomery lived to be 83 years old. She never married, never bore children, but she raised a generation of leaders who remembered that strength and kindness were not opposites, they were partners. Bane Sterling remained as the king's shield, commanding the warriors but answering to the guardian. He spent the rest of his life serving the woman he'd once scorned, carrying her water and splitting her firewood without complaint. And Fenris, the blind seer, the eighth marked child, the king who saw without eyes, led the Frostclaw pack through the Great Famine, through the War of the Three Peaks, through decades of hardship and triumph. He never regained his sight. He never needed it, because Clara had taught him the most important lesson. The deepest truths are found in the dark, and the strongest bonds are forged in sacrifice. The pack buried Clara beside the open pit when she finally passed, her hands still bearing the white scars of that first desperate digging. They say Fenris stood vigil for 3 days and 3 nights, and that his howl of grief could be heard from the lowlands to the peaks. They say the flowers that grew on her grave that spring were white as snow, the same color of the wolf she'd saved. And they say that the wind blows through Iron Ridge now. It doesn't scream anymore. It sings. Here's a final question for you. Would you have dug through that frozen earth? Would you have starved yourself to save something the world called worthless? If your answer is yes, if you believe true strength is measured in what we're willing to sacrifice, not what we're willing to take, then you understand what this story was really about. It wasn't about wolves or prophecies or ancient kingdoms. It was about you, about the choice we all face when the world tells us someone doesn't matter, when the crowd says to walk away, when it would be so much easier to just let them stay buried. Clara didn't walk away. She got on her knees and she dug. What will you dig for? Drop a comment, share this story, and if you believe the world needs more people who choose love over law, who choose sacrifice over strength, who choose to dig when everyone else walks away, then hit that subscribe button. Join the pack that refuses to leave anyone behind, because that's what guardians do.